Hi everybody and welcome to Gravel Union Talks, a podcast series full of inspiring stories, news and events from the world of gravel. Each month we will be talking with guests who are passionate about riding off the beaten track, adventure riding, bikepacking and gravel racing. I'm your host Carlo, and behind the microphone in Newcastle, UK is the man from Japan, Olly. You were in Japan.
How's it going? I was in Japan and it was absolutely amazing. I've been back 2 weeks, I think, and I still haven't processed it all yet. It still goes. I dream about it each night, for example. It's bonkers.
But you did Grinduro Japan.
Did Grinduro Japan. Then I had a couple of days in Kyoto where I did a whole day gravel riding with a local gravel cycling guide. And then I went to Sakai where Shimano are based. And I spent 2 days with the staff from Shimano, partly having a factory tour, which was just mind-bogglingly good. And also we had another day where we went to the Shimano Bicycle Museum and they took me to a knife manufacturing factory to see really the origins of Shimano 100 years ago.
Okay, knife. I didn't know that they started off as a...
The steel industry is what Sakai and Osaka, the wider area, is famous for. And so that was their background. Mr. Shimano, the originator, he grew up in the steel industry, and knife and sword manufacturing was all part of the steel industry there. So,
well, you learn. Well, actually, you might be the guest star of the show, but no, we have a guest star on the show for today, Gravel Union Talks. For today's episode, we're going to be chatting with Kerry MacPhee. We always try and give a quick overview of each guest, but Kerry is almost impossible to pigeonhole. A former elite level XC mountain bike racer who represented her home nation of Scotland at the Commonwealth Games in 2014, Kerry has also won what's arguably the world's hardest cyclocross race, the Three Peaks Challenge. That's impressive. She also won the Highland Trail 550 bikepacking event and set FKTs on the West Highland Way and the infamous and famous the Badger Divide. I think John is going to be jealous because we had him on the show a couple of episodes back. Kerry is also one of the co-organizers of one of the UK's most successful gravel events, the Duke's Weekender, and she's a voluntary director of 3 non-profit organizations, all geared up to help get more people outdoors and onto bikes. Away from riding and racing, Kerry is also a fluent Gaelic speaker and spends half a week working in the renewable energy sector as a community liaison officer. Just reading that list is like you get
it's
tired.
It's crazy, isn't it? You can't imagine how she can fit so much into her life.
It's ridiculous how much can you do in a week. I mean, impressive. Before we head over to Kerry, we have a topic of the month. Olly, what's the topic this month?
I thought, having seen Kerry's list of accolades and the variety in it, I thought we'd talk about variety because she fits such an amazing range of things into her life. So what I've done is I've gone back over articles we've published in the last couple of months to pluck out some favourites, but from totally different genres. So we're going to start, first of all, with an Italian rider called Claudia Gerosa, who's one of the Shimano Gravel Alliance riders. And she, her favourite role in the gravel riding world is inspiring particularly women and beginners particularly to get into gravel riding. Mm-hmm. So she works in her spare time as a coach and a guide and a kind of a motivator, and she does an amazing job of inspiring women to push themselves a bit more or to learn new skills or whatever. And so she wrote a really lovely story about riding as a gravel guide in a gravel camp earlier in the year in northern Italy.
Mm-hmm. And that's like an old ladies gravel camp.
Yeah. And Claudia's she's a bundle of energy. She's just incredible to spend time with, and I can see how she would be an extremely good guide. I think her enthusiasm and her passion would really shine through. So I think she'd be great at motivating.
Okay, before we head over to the other articles, we also have like the big the annual survey on Gravel Union.
We do indeed, which is on at the minute. and it's a chance for Gravel Union members to give us their feedback on the website, the social media, the podcast, all those good things. And also we ask some questions about what kind of bikes they ride, what they like, what events they go to, so we can get some insight into them and hopefully make the website and the social media more relevant to the members.
Absolutely.
And it takes about 10 minutes to fill in, and anyone who completes the survey gets entered into a competition to win a Scott gravel bike.
So that's always a nice incentive to be able to win a bike, a Scott bike in this case. So please check out the survey and take 10 minutes of your time to let us know what you feel about the website, but also how do you experience your gravel riding. Over to the this month's theme, Olly. We also have an article of our editor Sickens, Erwin, who went out with his family for a ride.
He did. Owen's again another phenomenon of the gravel riding world. He took his family to Brittany on the northwest coast of France. He'd been before and he loved it, but he didn't have his bikes last time. So this time he went back with his partner and their daughter, and it's all about family graveling, but the kind of the adventures they get up to. And they actually did some pretty gnarly riding, even though they had a fairly small child with them in a trailer, and they were riding some quite tough trails. But he's a super good photographer, so there's some beautiful photographs.
Nora was having the easy job. She was just
just sitting there giggling, I think. So or falling asleep. That's what it sounds like. Each time they start pedaling, she falls asleep very quickly. So
it's you have to check out the article. It's nice to see the family atmosphere in that one. We know we discussed this last week, but there's like this new next big thing in gravel riding, and that's the monster bikes.
Yeah,
I think
and I'm a big fan of, because I've had one since 2015. So I'm probably a bit.
You're the front runner there,
but. This is a story that came in from a German contributor, a guy called Timo, who's our most prolific contributor. He's written something like 80 stories for Gravel Union. So he's an incredible guy. And he had an old open mountain bike, a cross-country bike, that he didn't use much anymore, and so he wanted to make it more gravelly. So he's built himself a monster cross bike, and he put rigid forks on it and a Shimano GRX group set and drop bars, and it's a beautiful looking bike. So it's super cool, and it's a story about the build and what he does with it.
I see that in my cycling friend group. It's like everybody's trying to get one. I have a meeting with my mechanic this week, also I'm thinking of getting one myself and then building it up from scratch.
Just using the parts, because you may already have bits you can use, kind of a wheel set or some old tires or whatever. And then you can do it for a bit less money.
Yeah, because you actually were one of the front runners, because the first proper monster bike that I saw was at the Ride Gravel was it 2023? 2022 maybe.
Yeah, or maybe even 22.
Yeah, I guess.
I think. Yeah, I can't remember. I think maybe 22 actually. It's quite a while ago.
So that's excellent for people who want to have yet another bike. Please also consider the monster.
You never
bike,
need an excuse, do you, for another bike?
Because it's for rough terrain. You have the advantage of the mountain bike, but also the advantage of the gravel bike with the handlebar and everything. So looking forward to own one myself, Olly. But
great.
It's gonna take a while still. Well, let's head over to Kerry, our main guest of today.
Great. Okay, welcome to the main part of the podcast, and we're joined by Kerry MacPhee. We're really happy to have Kerry on
Welcome, Kerry.
the show with us.
Hello. How are you both?
We're doing
Very good.
just fine.
Thank you.
And you're in Edinburgh now?
I'm in Edinburgh at the moment in my office at work. I work in renewables 3 days a week, so yeah, I put my smart clothes on 3 days a week for the corporate gig. But usually I would be in Stirling.
Maybe you could saying the last time that we met, we were out on a hillside in the middle of mid Wales in the rain on a Genesis press camp, weren't we? So it's slightly different to now be in civvies in an office instead.
A little bit, and we recognise each other as well, which is quite a miracle.
Yeah, that's true.
Seeing as we've only hung out on bikes.
That's the thing. People with cycling helmets, and then you get across and you meet somebody and think, well, I know this guy. Do I?
Yeah.
And then later,
It is weird,
we
isn't it?
rode
How
together.
different
Yeah,
we
that's
look in
why.
cycling kit.
Maybe, Kerry,
Well-
we can start off with asking you to introduce yourself to the Gravel Union audience.
Yeah, so my name is Kerry MacPhee. I grew up in the Outer Hebrides, which is a chain of islands on the west coast of Scotland. A teeny tiny island called South Uist. Born and bred, folks are still there. And my first language is Gaelic. I didn't learn English till I went to school, actually. And I was always a really competitive young lass. I'm one of 5 children. I have a twin, so I think that just speaks of competition. I'm the oldest as well, so I always had to fight for my right to exist in a big family. And yeah, I always wanted to be an athlete, loved gladiators when I was younger, but I didn't have role models in the Outer Hebrides, so I took the traditional route and went to uni and so forth. And whilst I was studying a master's, picked up a bike from a cycle bike. It cost me 45 quid. It had down tube shifters. I won a silly little race, but it gave me the taste for success again, and the rest is history. That was me on a bike.
That's it. And you got into cycling relatively late, didn't you? In that case, considering the heights that you got to afterwards.
Yeah, it happened really quickly. Probably like mid 20s was when I started riding. But I love physiology and I love understanding the why. I was always quite annoying to coach because someone would tell me to go and do sweet spot, and I'd say, but why? Why? I want to understand why. And when I look back at my youth, number one, I came from a big family and I was a twin, so competition was inherent. Number two, we didn't have mobile phones then, and I grew up on a croft, so Dad would drag us out of our bed really early on in the morning to go and help with the sheep, and so I was always outside running about. And number three, I might be the most Scottish person you'll ever have met because I also play the bagpipes. So I've got a big set of lungs. So I think those three combined were a no-brainer.
Oh, that's a good training. Learning
So I
the
think
bagpipes.
I don't think we've ever had a guest that A, speaks Gaelic and B, plays the bagpipes, and certainly does all the other kind of champion cycling bits you've done as well.
This is so
Well,
impressive.
That's why I became a cyclist. It had to be.
Destiny. I looked up a little bit because I'm afraid my Gaelic is precisely none. So we looked up a few words. So at least we can say hello, which I think is Madin Va. Is that right?
Madin Va. Good
Madin Va.
morning. Yeah.
And that's how you pronounce it.
That's spot on, Ollie. I think you should go and jump on Duolingo and up your game for your
It only
Scotland
took me
visit.
3 hours of practicing that
Is
to be able
Gaelic
to say
on
it.
is Gaelic on Duolingo?
Yes,
Yes?
it is. Yeah,
Oh, I should-
yeah, and it's been growing in popularity. It's very cool to be a Gaelic speaker. Yeah.
Is it? No, okay, now, so that's a good question. Is it Gaelic or Gaelic? You say Gaelic, so we've been
So-
doing it wrong.
Well, yes and no. So Gaelic is Gaelic for Gaelic.
Ah, okay.
That's how I
I get it,
explain
I
that
get it.
way.
Right.
So yeah, most Gaelic speakers would say Gaelic, and most English speakers would probably say Gaelic, unless I
Okay.
come at them with my wrath and say Gaelic.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, good. Well, every day's a school day, so that's good. No, when I was looking up how Gaelic works and just some facts about it, and it turns out that only 2.5% of the Scottish population speak it. So it's a pretty minority language, but you're super passionate about it. And
Yeah.
is it primarily from the west of Scotland, which is why you speak it?
Yes, it is now from the west coast of Scotland. But what's crazy about actual Scotland, and Gaelic has diminished for a number of reasons. At one point, there was like a prohibition around Gaelic, and there was pressure on Gaelic speakers not to speak their language. But everywhere you go in Scotland, there is Gaelic influence. All the hills have Gaelic names. All the lochs have Gaelic names. And when you understand the meanings and the interpretations and the translations, it brings your landscape to life, and you just see things in a different way. A simple one is, I love fairies. We'll probably come to that. Glen Shee. The Glen of Shee in Gaelic is a fairy. It's the Glen of the fairies. And when you look into the etymology and the mythology and the legends, there are loads of beautiful stories. And if you pass through that glen, you just kind of see it in a different way. And there's a loch I always like to talk about in Aberfoyle and Gravelfoyle, where I ride bikes. It's Loch Chon. And people always pronounce it Loch Chon, much to my dismay, but it's okay, I'm correcting the population one by one. And Loch Chon means Loch of the dog, and you kind of think, is it dog-shaped? What's going on here? But actually, there's a beautiful legend about a dog-like monster coming out of the water and snatching a tinker child from the shores of the loch and disappearing. And it's just, when you're travelling by bike and seeing these places, and then it's being enhanced by a story or a legend that was passed down, it's so beautiful. And myths and legends, I think, are created and told to keep systems of biodiversity in place. So they help us to look after our shores and look after our fauna and flora. And I love it, and I love sharing that with people and telling them about the geeky history and the whiskey smugglers that are around the Trossachs and so forth. Beautiful.
We're going to have to work on our pronunciation, Carla, because I think my Scottish pronunciation is awful. So it's good to get your proper insight, Kerry. Now, we've been doing some Insta stalking because your Instagram account is brilliant and it's full of a real mix of inspiration. But one of the things that really stuck in my brain recently, you did a post where you'd gone home back to Uist, and you did a post about, and I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, it looks like it's Cianalas.
Yeah,
which was
Cianalas.
A deep-seated sense of longing or belonging to a place where your roots lie. Now, I think in English that there isn't a word,
No.
and I don't know in Dutch. Is there a word, Carlo, for that?
No, no. It's maybe there would be like a German word for that. Yeah, I think the Germans have a word for that, but in Dutch there's no word. I can recall it, I guess.
But it's just a really beautiful, a kind of a sums up such a lot of emotion and feelings in one word, and it kind of felt. I mean, you were obviously super proud of being coming from Uist and from the Western Islands, and it seemed to sum up a lot of your personality in one word. So we thought we'd get you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Cianalas, every islander feels that, the longing for home. And I used to think that we maybe over-romanticise the islands and people talk about going to this rural place, and people like to kind of glorify the islands or fetish it even on the socials, but people who actually live in those places and breathe in those places. To take a step back, one of the things that kind of not irritates me, but just makes me wince a little bit, is when people go to visit the islands and they say, I'm on South Uist, rather than I'm in South Uist. And for me, what they're saying is, I'm on an island and I'm on a mountain of rocks surrounded by sea. But when you say in, it's I'm in a community amongst living, breathing people who work, who go to school, who have families. And I think for semantics, I love it. I love linguistics and semantics, and those little changes in words are really important. And Cianalas, it's such a romantic way of describing that longing for going home. And when I go home, I do feel like I've just taken a big deep breath. I go down to the beach, I'm 5 minutes from the beach, and it's, the biggest skies you've ever seen, the starriest skies at night, and it's always windy. You're always surrounded by a big spiritual hug when you're in the Western Isles, because there's no trees, there's no cover. It is sparse, but it's beautiful, and even with so few people on those islands, there's a real sense of community, and you look out for each other, the door's always open, people are popping in for a cup of tea. And it's wonderful. Because you can feel quite lonely sometimes on the mainland, I think, even though you're surrounded by people. And Gaelic is such a beautiful language. And another good example of that, actually, is that when people are sad or depressed in Gaelic, they would say, ha bron orm. And when you translate that to English, it's sadness is on me. So it's not that I am sad, it's that sadness
like
is
a
on
cloak.
me. Yeah. And you can take that away from yourself. It's not part of you. It's just something that's come to you. And just those little beautiful ways of describing things that I don't know, are quite touching and powerful.
Yeah, you can hear it in your voice, actually, how passionate you are about it.
Thank you.
And the community where you're from, because it's a small island. How many people, just to get an impression on how the community looks like?
So there's about 1,000 people in South Uist, and 5 of the islands are now joined by causeway, and a causeway is a flat bridge. And I remember the last causeway getting put in when I was in school, actually. So that's Eriskay, South Uist, Benbecula, North Uist, and Bernary, and there's one high school on the middle island, and there's probably about 250 pupils at that high school for the whole chain of 5 islands.
Okay.
So some of the kids have quite a long journey to get to school then.
Yeah, they
If
do.
they're the polar
Yeah.
north or south.
Yeah, they used to have to board if they came from Eriskay, actually,
Okay.
before the causeway got put in. So it's a long, slender chain of islands, and it sits on a tectonic plate. So the whole west coast of the Western Isles is all stunning beaches, absolutely breathtaking beaches, and the right is more rocky and hilly.
Yeah.
But in the US, where I am, it's one main road down the middle, and it's so flat.
Okay.
It's just really flat. So
Well, I can
Oh, yeah.
relate. I can relate to that, being a Dutchman.
Yeah.
So,
people always think that you're not getting good training when you're riding flat,
No,
but you
that's not.
are,
It's
because
always
your legs
windy.
never stop. All that mitochondrial stimulation is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's
And
great for
presumably
you.
it's pretty windy as well, seeing as there's not a
Yeah.
lot between you and North America.
That's true. It's
I think
always
that-
blowing a gale.
you can do your best block training at when it's flat, because you can. It's really something that you have to need. I don't think you will have many traffic lights over there, but in the
No.
Netherlands you need to be careful with that, because it can be crowded over here.
Okay, we're going to do one more Gallic question before we move on. But another Insta post you did recently, and you discovered that your name translates to either the Black Fairy or the Dark Fairy, which, for anybody that's ever met you or ridden with you, or probably even listens to you, is not at all how I picture you, because you're very bubbly and enthusiastic. And even when we rode in the pouring rain, and you were so happy and bouncy, so the Dark Fairy didn't really fit. But you, in your Insta post, you said actually you quite liked the fact that was your
Yeah.
name. So tell us a bit about that. How does the Dark Fairy fit with your personality?
So my surname is MacPhee, and I always just assumed that in the north of Scotland, Caithness, there are a lot of MacPhees, and they're known as tinkers, and a lot of them used to live in caves, and they used to just rattle about with pots and pans trying to make things. So I just thought I was descendant of Caithness tinkers, and I'm not talking out of line when I say this. This is true to fact. But last Christmas, my dad was like, "No, MacPhee actually means do she," and I was like, "How?" And he says, MacPhee comes from do she. Do is black, she is fairy." And I had absolutely no idea, but I was already really into folklore and mythology, and Aberfoyle in the Trossachs, where I do a lot of my riding, has a lot of fairy history. And I just thought, wow, this is insane. This is meant to be nominative determinism, I think is the phrase when you start morphing into your surname. So yeah, I've slowly been growing a set of wings, and
That explains why you're so fast on a bike then.
But no, you're right. Like when I ride bikes, I have a really deep sense of gratitude at the freedom that I get, and I really care about social justice, and I'm a very deep thinker, and I'm a very, very sensitive person as well, and I have to work quite hard on that, and which is why when I get on a bike and when I'm around people, I take a lot from their energy. Actually, I'm quite an empath, and I guess like the Black Fairy part of me is that part of me that has to fight the discomfort that I often feel, and some of the things that have happened in my life, perhaps. But it's also the part of me that makes me feel a little bit like an underdog a lot of the time. Like some of the things that I've managed to do, I don't even know how I've managed to do them. So it must be the Black Fairy in me that's got me there.
Okay. It doesn't, the dark part of you doesn't come across, at least in the time we've spent together. You're very good at hiding it.
No, I should hope not. But I think we all have a shadow self, for sure, don't we? And that's the beautiful thing about bikes is that you take a lot of good energy from those, and it helps you just release some of those discomforts that you might carry with you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right. A couple more language questions, and they're not Gaelic ones. These are Kerry-isms, I think. Some more things from Instagram. You use the word spraffle a lot, and so we need a translation. What the heck is a spraffle?
Do you know what a blether is?
It just means, I think, talking or
so
gassing.
To blether is just to natter. So to spraffle is much the same, but
Okay.
I quite like spraffling. Sometimes comes with a couple of extra arms and legs. You'll start talking about fairies and end up discussing goblins or something. And you just a spraffle is just a beautiful conversation and a beautiful Scottish word that I absolutely love. The sound of it sums it up. I reckon.
Yeah,
It does, absolutely. I can imagine an enthusiastic alcohol-related chat sounds like a kind of a pub chat sounds like a spraffle.
A spirit spraffle,
A spirit
whiskey.
spraffle. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
good point. Okay, and then one other one. What's a braw, and in what context should we use it?
Oh, bro is just fantastic, good, wonderful, excellent, and any of those beautiful kind of
Great.
just, and yeah, I like bro. Bro is a good Scottish word. If I'm feeling a little bit more extra, I'll say brosome.
Okay, see, now how much have we learned already today, Carlo? It's improved our lexicon massively.
But bro is with a rolling R. Like,
Yeah.
So I can do that.
Yeah.
Can you?
It could be a Dutch word.
Yeah, bro. Yeah.
Bro.
Actually, it sounds a bit like my dialect. It also has
Yeah,
like
that's actually called a Sparavatsky vowel, that kind of extra addition of a vowel. So
Yeah?
Alba, which is Gaelic for Scotland, it's spelt Alba, but it's pronounced Alba. And that
I didn't know
is
that.
a Sparavatsky vowel, and you get it quite commonly in Gaelic language and in some Scots as well, and when you really heavily roll an R as well. There
Well,
we go.
See, we've learned tons
we
today.
learn. We learn. It's I'm still, we should have asked you to bring a bagpipe. That's
Okay, next time.
next time around you'll be
Okay.
Maybe in an office environment that might
Sure.
raise a few eyebrows.
your colleagues would go like, what the?
Okay, so we've done language. We're going to go back to your cycling history first of all. So you mentioned that you got into it quite late. Was there somebody or something that inspired you to get your first bike?
It was just my pal. Who I was sharing an office with. We worked for the university whilst doing our masters, and the Triathlon Scotland office was next to ours, and she convinced me to do a triathlon with her, which is actually how it started. And I used to love running anyway. And the two of us went to a cycle bike, and I used to cycle from the city of Stirling to the university, which was about 3 miles, and I'd be really smug and happy with myself. And then my long ride was to go via a wee village called Bridge of Allen, which is probably about 5 miles, and that used to be my long ride. Which is ridiculous.
When you think about what you do now, and you're doing hundreds and hundreds of miles in a day, it's quite amazing.
Yeah. So Shemaine was probably the inspiration actually to get on that bike, because I remember being like, just looking at her like she had 5 heads when she suggested doing a triathlon. But that's often the way with these Genesis stories.
Yeah. The running fits very well with your cyclocross career later on then. So we could talk about that now, Sheree, that you won the 3 Peaks, which I think for British cyclocross riders, it's the epitome of cross racing. But for anyone outside the UK, I don't know how well known it is. So do you want to tell us a bit about what is the 3 Peaks and why should people think about doing it?
Yeah, so the 3 Peaks is billed as the hardest cyclocross race in the world. One of the reasons it's the hardest cyclocross race in the world is because you can't go and recce it. So unlike Scotland, where we have the right to roam, you can't just pedal your bike anywhere you like in England. And it goes up 3 Peaks in the Yorkshire Dales, and they're so tough that a lot of the up the hill sections are big hiker bikes, and then you're tearing down quite gnarly sometimes trails down the hills as well, and then linking them by road. So, and there's loads of competitors, and it's mental. It doesn't make sense, but it's amazing. And so many people had said, you should do the 3 Peaks. It's got your name all over it. You should do the 3 Peaks. And the year I did it, it was 2019, I think, actually. I had an awful year in many ways. I had lost my partner suddenly. He died in Halloween 2018. Oof. And the year following, and to date now, actually, like that's something that should never happen to you in your early 30s, and it's not something anyone really knows how to navigate when you're in your early 30s either. And I knew when I rode my bike then, or the feeling that I had when I rode my bike then, was that any discomfort I was feeling on the bike was not real discomfort. Nothing compared to the pain of losing somebody that you loved in the way that I did so suddenly. And I didn't have the Three Peaks on my radar in 2019, and a friend who loves cyclocross had sent me a message. Ruby says you should enter the Three Peaks, and Ruby was the name of his dog.
Okay.
And I really respect this guy, Davy Graham. He lives on the Isle of Mull, and he does a lot for Scottish cyclocross. And I was like, oh, stuff it, I've got nothing to lose, I'll enter it. And I got in, because it's a ballot, it's really difficult to get in. And as soon as I commit to something, there's like a switch in my brain, and I'm like, right, that's it, committed now. So I went out with my bike, marching up the steepest hills in the Ochils, practicing my running, and I remember being at a race, and Nick Craig, who is a legend in the UK, mountain bike legend, cyclocross legend, has won the Three Peaks. He was at a race that I was doing, the Duke's Weekender, and I said to him, oh, tell me about the Three Peaks, like, what should I expect? And Nick said, you're going to get cramp. And in my head I went, oh, nah, I've been marching up and down the hills, I'm not going to get cramp. And the race started, and I felt quite good, and I still had this kind of mental feeling of, this isn't pain, this is not real pain. Like, what a gift to just be riding your bike. Like, this is fantastic. And I remember going up the first climb and being like, holy crap, this is really steep. You're like hanging on to tussets of grass on the way up. Like, you're literally dragging yourself up the hill. It's mad. And I got to the top of the hill, and I thought, I've got cramp in my quads.
Right, because it's so steep.
And I was like, crap, Nick was right. I did get cramp. But I don't know, sometimes when I get on the bike, I just go on gratitude fumes or something. Like, I just knew everything was hurting, but I was just like, no, this is not real. And I remember crossing the line, and it just so happened that somebody I knew, I think I'd gone down on my own. I was really like, I'm doing this on my own, Miss Independent, don't need any support. Lewis isn't here to help me anymore, so I'm just going to crack on myself. And a woman who knew both Lewis and I happened to be at the finish line, and I crossed the line and just burst into tears, and she burst into tears as well. And it was absolutely magic. Just because what they would say about that race is that nobody ever wins it on their first attempt, because it's so hard, and you need to kind of get your head around it. And Lachlan Morton raced it that year as well, and did a really cool film with Rafa. So it was really special. And it was also, I had started riding a Genesis mountain bike, but I was very Scottish about riding Genesis, and I never ever asked them for anything because I was just really Scottish and scared. And I heard afterwards that somebody in the marketing department in Genesis or Madison said, who's that girl riding a Genesis bike at the Three Peaks?
And winning.
And they were like, she's actually, and it was my own bike, I'd bought this bike.
Wow.
But they were like, she actually rides our new Mantle mountain bike. So that was kind of the start of what is really now a long-term relationship with Genesis as well, I would say.
That's very cool.
It was that was a really special event for me, actually.
It's an amazing
really good
story.
Memories.
Should we talk a bit more about events in general? Because as well as taking part in them, you're also an organizer, and you're unusual in the event organizing world in that you work with another woman to organize probably the biggest one or the most famous one in Scotland, which makes you pretty rare because most events are run by middle-aged blokes. So what is it like being an event organizer as a woman, and what have you found what challenges have you found, or how do you do things differently, do you think, than other event organizers?
So I fell into event organising somewhat accidentally, I would say. So in 2022, so I used to go and race this Duke's Weekender race in Scotland, which my friends in Aberfoyle would organise. And I became really good friends with them, and we used to train together and ride together, and we got really fit through COVID, and we've been on loads of fun adventures together. But in 2022, I was supposed to be racing, but I had a really awful accident. I came off my bike, I've got no memory of it, coming down the Duke's Pass in Aberfoyle, and the bone in my forearm actually fell out. Like it cracked, the handlebar compressed my forearm, and the bone fell out. So it was a really serious accident. It broke my jaw. I was in hospital for 4 days, and took a really, really long time to heal, actually. I've got some impressive scars and metal work. But my friends who were organising Duke's Weekender you're not you're not racing it, so why not help us? And I was like, yeah, sure, okay. And it's a really, really hard job to organise a race. It's really, really tough. So once they finished, there were 2 families in Aberfoyle, and whilst I was down and out, they took absolute advantage and said, Kerry, why don't you, we'll create this role for you at Bike Trossa Cycling Development Officer. Maybe you could run the event next year. And Gubbins here was like, yeah, sure, no worries.
How hard can it be?
I know, and that's how it happened. So with their
Brilliant.
support, I ran my first Dukes Weekender in 2022 would have been the first one. And then Beth Legg, who I work with as well, who's absolutely fantastic and a total hoot, came on board as well. And the 2 of us ran Dukes Weekender and then started the Grand Old Dukes, which is a new massive event in Scotland to rival Dirty Reaver.
Great.
And that's our absolute favourite. It was fantastic. And what people always say when they come to our events are called gravel foil events. Grand Old Dukes is 111 miles, 10,000 feet of climbing around the Trossachs. You don't cross paths at any point, and you're riding along lochs and glens and beautiful quiet single track roads. It's amazing, and people always say our events have got a great vibe. And Beth and I were probably crying internally when we're organising these events, because honestly, I cannot tell you how, I don't even know if I enjoy a lot of it. The only part I really enjoy is the day and just feeding off people's energy.
Okay.
But people always say you have such a nice vibe at your events. It's always a good vibe, and we're not militant. If you're late for sign on, that's fine. You can still sign on, chill out, it's okay.
Okay.
And we look out for people, and we're still learning, we're still figuring it out. We're really rubbish at asking for things, the 2 of us. We're so Scottish. We need to figure out how we do work better with sponsors and all of that kind of thing. But ultimately, Beth has a young family. I'm competitive, so we have those 2 polar opposing approaches to things, but we're both really community as well. So I want people to have a race experience, but an inclusive experience, and Beth wants the family element to be included, but Beth also loves pushing herself as well. But what does that look like? So it's about kind of capturing it and not being everything for everyone, but trying as much as possible to have something for everyone. And we're really, really inclusive. Mm-hmm. We ran the first ever adaptive cycle category at Dukes Weekender 2022, and because of that, other event organisers across the UK have started to do that too. So yeah, we like to be at the forefront of new ideas. And
we ran a story on Gravel Union, it might have been 22 actually, all about the adaptive cycling around gravel foil, and the fact that the trails have been designed to make it accessible to everybody, no matter what type of bike you ride. Were you involved with the trail part of it as well as the event part of it?
Yeah, so the way that happened, we saw a guy on an adaptive bike riding around gravel foil, and we were like, wow, we need to get in touch with this guy. And we arranged a Wednesday evening ride in the summer with Neil, who's now the manager.
This is the same chap we did a story about. So it all makes sense.
Yeah.
With Neil, who's the managing director of Adaptive Riders Collective. And before we met up with him, I said to myself, right, park your expectations, Kerry. This is going to be a really slow ride. Just be aware that you're just going to be pootling through the Trossachs. And Neil turned up. I had no idea how powerful the motors on e-adaptive bikes are. He dropped me on the climbs, and he still dines out on that. I couldn't believe it. My brain was blowing. It was like you're just riding with your pals, but you just have to put a little bit more effort into talking down the way rather than back the way. And I met up with Neil, and I fully expected him to just be taking his time, just pootling along, but it was just like riding with pals. And Neil and I became fast friends after that. He's really good fun. He's from Stirling actually. And we get on really well. And that year at Dukes Weekender, I managed to get some funding from Sport Scotland off of the back of the UCI World Champs coming to Scotland. And use that funding, ring-fence that funding for Neil to develop the Adaptive Riders side of Duke's Weekender.
Great.
And the two of us also worked on going out and recceing all the routes and trails in and around Gravel Foyle and making sure that they're adaptive friendly. We got some gate sizes reduced as well, and Neil is now, doing absolutely fantastically well with Adaptive Riders Collective and part of lots of events through the UK and just getting more people riding. And if you haven't ridden with a knee adaptive bike, I absolutely recommend it. It's so cool and just makes sense on gravel.
Great. Now, you do a lot of work with inclusivity and community as well as adaptive riders. You do lots of work with families, with kids, and also promoting getting more women into cycling. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that side of your personality as well? What inspired you to go from being a racer to being kind of community driven?
Yeah, I've asked myself this question, and I on the one hand, I think it's because I want everyone to have what I've had in a sense. Cycling has given me so much. And the other part of me wonders, when I really, really dig deep, am I doing it because I'm nervous that when I was racing XC, that I didn't always thank people or recognise the invisible hands that helped me? And am I just trying to make sure that I make up for that by giving? And I don't think that's a bad thing. If you recognise, did I say thank you to the people that helped me? Did I recognise everyone? I'm not sure, because you can be quite insular and myopic when you're racing. And it really stresses me out that I maybe let people down or just didn't say thank you or didn't show my appreciation. And I think those two things, just recognising or feeling that I want other people to have what I have had and do have, and also just, I suppose, just giving back or saying thank you in a roundabout way to everyone that helped me as well. And I really get a lot of energy from seeing people enjoy themselves on bikes, improve on bikes. So I'm a director with Adaptive Riders Collective as well, and also with Dirt Divas, Mountain Bike and Gravel, which is a women's festival and also collective that runs a women's festival every year, and we do events through the year as well. And it's just a really beautiful thing, just seeing people love what you love, isn't it? Why would you not want to share that? And if you can provide that opportunity, why not?
Last year I got the opportunity to go on a press trip that was mainly women. I think probably there were 7 women and 3 blokes, something like that, which is the polar opposite to normal. Anything to do with cycling in general is unfortunately very male dominated, and it was incredible how positive the atmosphere was. It was very, instead of being testosterone and competitive and kind of willy waving, it was much more friendly and people encouraging each other and more caring. How do you think we can make the cycling industry more positive, more take kind of the what I felt on that trip? How do we make the rest of the cycling industry more like that?
I think it is about making a conscious decision to try and include females in those scenarios, but I know that that's not always possible. But somebody has to sort of start that deck of cards, don't they? And it's it's a patience project, I think, to get us up to where we need to go, and we might never do that because it is a male-dominated sport, and to a degree I think we have to accept that as well, that challenge will always exist, and that's okay. I was at a Limitless Festival this year, which is a mountain bike festival up in Scotland, and I was on a panel with women, and on that panel was Jules McLean, who is the Fox mechanic on the World Cup circuit. So Jules and Taj drive the big massive Fox truck around all the World Cups, and it's really cool, really badass that she does that. And somebody said to her that one of the questions they asked was, how do I, as a female who wants to be a mechanic, make sure that I'm given fair opportunities, because I don't feel that I do? And her answer really stuck with me, and she hesitated, and she said, I'm not really sure if I should say this. I don't know if this is the right thing to say. And I remember just elbowing her and saying, just say it anyway. She said, you just need to do your job really, really well. And you just need to prove that you can do your job really, really well and that you're worthy of being in that position. And rather than be hung up on the fact that I'm a woman, therefore I am not going to get chosen, just know that there's maybe that bias, that bias maybe exists. But if you do your job really, really well, nobody can argue with you.
Okay.
So there's two things there. It's giving that opportunity bit by bit, but it's also, unfortunately, on us to prove that we can do our jobs well enough to fit in. And whilst we may not want to do that, and whilst it might feel like, well, why can't we just slot in anyway? Bring the two together, and yeah, let's hope that males and females collectively can work towards making it a more safe, fair, parity-driven environment in cycling.
Great.
And I think compared to the road cycling, gravel is doing a good job. There's still always room for improvement, but I really like the inclusivity that is in most gravel events. Still again, room for improvement there always is, but the openness of the gravel community, I really, really appreciate, because I've been around also in the road cycling, and then I think in that community there's more of this competitiveness, the testosterone, because also of the history. I think the history of gravel is quite new, so we can mold that still, and the role that women have in that is significant. We really appreciate that, and like what the whole United in Gravel that also Shimano is promoting is really the core of our community, and we should all everybody should embrace that. And talking about that so enthusiastically, Kerry, is inspiring. Really, I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, and you're right. Gravel can be almost everything for everyone in a lot of ways. I absolutely agree. It's brilliant. I love the explosion of it, and I love that I'm in there and in with the dudes and in with the gals.
We're going to talk a little bit more about racing now, because you've had a super successful year this year, starting off with the Highland Trail 550. Now, if people who are listening to this who are just gravel riders, just in inverted commas, may not have ever heard of the Highland Trail 550 because it's more mountain bikey, but you want to tell us a little bit about it and how what led you to do it, and what it was like to do so well at it when it's such a hard event.
Yeah, so the Highland Trail is billed as one of the toughest ultra bikepacking events in Europe, and it starts in Tyndrum in the Highlands, and it essentially does a figure of 8.5 up to Bialahorn in the north of the Highlands, and back down again. It's 550 miles long. It was 560 miles this year. There was a big detour because of a broken bridge, and you do actually pass through the most remote part of the UK, which is Fisherfields. It's the furthest point away from any main road in the UK. And it's wild, it's Scottish, it's unpredictable. You've got to be pretty tough to get yourself on that start line, never mind get round that course for sure. And it's just an incredible race. And what was special about it this year, and last actually, is that Alan, the organiser, makes a really concerted effort to have a 50-50 male and female gender split.
Great.
I think in the end there was 34 women and 36 men, like very close to the split, which is unheard of in ultra. Kicked up a bit of a stooshy amongst many of the men because it's hard to get a place. As a man, it's very difficult to get a place in that race. It's always oversubscribed, but it's just wonderful to have so many women undertake such a. You think women can't do hard things,
as well.
But yeah, like that's crazy. There's far easier ultras that people could do, but they want to do the Highland Trail.
And how was it to, particularly as a Scottish competitor, do you think that gave you some advantage compared to some of the others that weren't used to riding in the Highlands or weren't used to riding in such remote conditions?
Possibly. So I hadn't actually done an ultra event until this year, though I'd done quite a lot of bikepacking-y things. But like the Three Peaks, the Highland Trail has been one of those things that so many people have said, you've got to do this, it's got your name all over it. I'm known as being like a tough nut, and I guess, Hebridean, that's probably why. and I'd booked some time off work and gone up in April and ended up in snow showers, hail showers, gales. It was just the wildest weather you could absolutely think of. And I remember passing through Torridon, which is a remote mountain region, really popular with mountain bikers, a destination kind of place. And I was at the top of the Torridon climb, and I had no signal. I was running out of food. Everything was soaked. It was driving sleet. And I thought maybe I could stop a wee bit before at a little shop. Everything was closed because it was April. And in my head I went, if anything goes wrong right now, I am in a lot of trouble. But I did have my spot tracker with me. I was like, just keep moving forward, just one step after the other. And I got myself off the hill. And I got to the bottom of the hill, and Strathcarron, a small town, was quite close by. So I ducked behind a bush. My fingers were frozen. It took me about 10 minutes to get booking.com because there was no way I was going to sleep in a bivvy. Couldn't find anywhere in Lochcarron to stay. So I looked at my map and I thought, right, Carlow-Falhalsh, block headwind, just pedal for 2 hours and you'll be able to find somewhere, even if it's a bus shelter. And I started pedaling, and like a mirage, the Strathcarron Hotel appeared in front of me. I thought, oh my gosh, I went in and I was like, look, I already looked absolutely pathetic, but I like ramped it up even more. I was like, oh, do you have any spare rooms? And she went, yeah, we do. And I must have, I don't know what, there's probably an explanation for this, but I burst into tears because it had been such a tough day on the bike.
Right.
To know that I was going to have a warm room for the night was just the biggest relief ever. But I think that really set me up, that kind of experience of knowing that I could make it through in those conditions just really helped me. And I know when I get my head down, I am a very determined person, and I wasn't doing the Highland Trail to, like, I wanted to do well, of course I did. I'm not going to pretend that I was just, out to just enjoy the Highlands. Of course I wanted to do well, but at the same time, I'd never done an ultra before, so I didn't know what to expect. And it like, I fell apart in the last day. I tore ligaments in my foot, so it was absolutely awful in the last few hours. I had a really hellish time, but I couldn't believe that I managed to do it. And again, I carried that feeling of, like, I remember waking up being like, oh my gosh, all I have to do today is ride my bike. That's it. What a gift. And I know that sounds corny, but it was. It was like, just 4 days of doing nothing but riding a bike. This is insane. And that really carried me through. It was sore, it was painful, but it wasn't real pain. It was, I really do feel fortunate and gratitude for being able to do what I can.
You went so you won that, and you beat all but 5 of the men in that event, which is spectacularly good. After that, then you decided that you wanted to do another ultra, so you came down to Northumberland, where I'm based, and you rode a new event this year called the Land Between, which isn't as gnarly as the Highland Trail 550, but it's, having ridden some of it, it's pretty tough, and you did super well in that as well. So do you want to tell us a bit about your, because was that your first visit to Northumberland as well?
Yeah, I think it was actually. Yeah, it was by bike. The reason I did it actually was because Rich Rothwell, the organiser, who I know, had offered me a free place. So I was like, oh,
that's a good reason as any.
Yeah,
that's...
Why not? And it took me a really long time to recover from the Highland Trail, actually. Like, I was just wrecked. And I think I maybe had like 3 weeks of panic training. But I love seeing places and exploring places by bike. And I am, I probably am made for ultra. And I want to eventually be in a position. At the Highland Trail, I won by 1 day. Like, the next woman was a day behind me, which is insane. And they were experienced ultra cyclists as well. So I want to be in a position where I can duke it out with women. But I figured that the Land Between would give me an opportunity to see how I would get on pedalling through the night. So that was my goal for that event. And I remember when we started, Niall Shannon, who'd finished behind me at the Highland Trail, we've got this like invisible bond now because of the experience that we had there. We sort of ended up in a group of 4 together. And I remember pedalling along, and I was like, who's in front of us? And Niall started laughing, and he was like, nobody. We are the front.
Great.
Oh, crap. that every time I'm racing, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get found out. I'm going to get found out. I've done it wrong. I shouldn't be here. What are we doing? What are we doing? And it was hard. My perceived effort was really hard because I wasn't really in ultra shape. But I think with ultra, it's so much of the time it's your head. Like you might not feel great. Like just everything just felt just a notch high. And I peeled off the guys after about 10 or 12 hours to get some food, and just maintained my fourth place. Like yo-yoed with fourth and fifth, Jack right behind me. But then when I got into fourth, that was it. I don't know how. I just kept pedaling.
Great.
And it was beautiful. It was so nice to see Northumberland. It was such a special way to enjoy that part of the country. And you know, as much as I like to give England a hard time, some of the northern parts are all right.
Rich did a great job of route selection for that. The variety that you saw, I mean, it's everything from really super wild up in the moors to really urban and quite gritty. And some bits are not very beautiful, but it's certainly you get a heck of an experience.
It was so varied. I remember at the end of the Highland Trail, Quinda Verhul from the Netherlands, I think maybe. We were chatting about the Highland Trail, and she was like, "Oh, do you have ADHD?" And I was like, "I don't think so." And she was like, "Oh, never mind." And I was like, "Well, what is it?" And she says, "Oh, well, the Highland Trail suits people with ADHD because there's so much variation. Because in a lot of ultras, it can get really boring."
Okay.
And that popped into my head when I did the land between. Actually, I was like, "Oh, this would suit neurodivergent people because there's so much stimulus all the time."
Yeah, that's true. It changes
so
every 10 minutes. So what's next on your list now? If you've in the UK, you've either set fastest known times or you've won the toughest events we've got. So what's next?
Yeah, I really would love to go and do the bigger events like Atlas and all of them, but I don't know how to make it make sense, like financially or anything, like because I just do it myself, and because you know I haven't been the smartest when it's come to I work corporate, but a lot of the stuff I do is just like voluntary and things because I just enjoy it. So I need to sort of figure out that side of things and maybe make the economics make a little bit more sense. Because I want to be pushed, and I want to see if like this brain and head that I seem to have on my shoulders really is made for ultra, or if I've just got lucky. I do also want to maybe go back and do the Highland Trail again. So whilst I didn't set the FKT this year, the FKT was set when the route was 12 miles shorter, and it was 10 miles longer this year. So I was the fastest known speed for a woman, but with 10 miles shorter and now knowing the route, I kind of fancy it. Just being the Hebridean girl, the islands girl. I kind of want to see what I can do if I just push a little bit harder, because I did enjoy a lot of it and I was relaxed in a lot of it, and you know I took my time and I drank my coffee and had my lunch and stuff. So yeah, I'm tempted by that, but yeah, I would also just I want to duke out with the fast girls. I love being pushed.
Okay.
Maybe you should
go on, Carlo.
Maybe you should reach out to Genesis, because you need to. Maybe they can help you economically to go to the other big races outside of the UK.
They are so good to me with my bikes and my Shimano parts. They're absolutely wonderful, and they're coming up to at Gravelfoil a week on Saturday. We're doing a Genesis Bicycle Club ride out, actually, not just for Genesis riders. So I'm excited to have their fleet of demo bikes on hand and for people to try, because they're a cool brand.
What bikes do you use yourself?
I have a quadrifer, 2 quadrifers actually, a titanium and a steel one, and they're fantastic. So I rode the steel one when I did the Land Between, which is quite cool. I quite liked not being on carbon, because you know this is quite a funny story. I remember at the end of the Highland Trail, one of the girls that finished behind me, we were sitting having lunch, and she was like, "Oh yeah, my bike's 8 years old." And it was sort of like, "Oh yeah, like you've got something new and I've got something old." And I was like, "No way, my bike's 8 years old as well," which it is.
So that's that Genesis, excuse out of the window.
My Genesis mantle, and I think we do get tied up with like I need a carbon bike and I need the fastest thing, and it's nice. It is nice, and it does make you a little bit faster if it's a little bit lighter. But I did enjoy the kind of like I just felt like a proper ultra cyclist on a steel bike. So, and my mountain bike's a Mantle. They don't make those anymore, but I've had that for approximately 7 or 8 years now, and it's my favourite mountain bike ever. I love it.
I'd persuade Genesis they want to start making them again.
I know, honestly, it's the perfect bike for bike packing.
Super.
Do you have a role at Genesis? Do you give input to them on their bikes, or when you test bikes, or?
So they are thinking of making another mountain bike. Actually, it won't be a carbon bike. So they have asked for my input on what I liked about the Mantle and how I think another bike could look. Whether they take that on board or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, I've ridden other bikes and other brands as well, and I have been around bikes for a long time. It's funny, when I was racing World Cups, I actually got a full sus Scott for myself, but I just didn't get on with it. I thought I had to be on a full sus because everyone else was riding a fully, but I ended up going back to the Mantle because at the time when the Mantle came out, it was quite slack. And most XC mountain bikes now have become a lot slacker because courses have become more gnarly. And it was really nice feeling to, like, I had to go through that process to find out that Mantle and I are just meant to be.
Destiny. Right, final question, I think. We ask everybody the same last question, which is, if you're on a desert island, what bike would you have? And seeing as you're, I think, our only guest who actually comes from an island, this seemed like an extremely appropriate question. So if you were going to go back to Uist and you could only have one type of bike, what would it be?
I think I'd take my Quadrifer, actually. I love my mountain bike, but the Quadrifer, it takes fat tyres, like 47s. So, I can go down the Macher. The Macher is just the stretch of land in between the beach and the main lying area.
Okay.
And if I needed to nip to the co-op, I'd get there quicker than my mountain bike.
Perfect. The right answer. It does seem appropriate for an island girl to have a question about a desert island.
Yeah, it does. Well, thanks a lot, Kerry. We've been chatting for almost an hour now, so we're getting to the end of this episode. We'll have some links in the show notes to check you out even more, also on your socials, because like Olly said, they're hilarious now and again. So
they're really inspiring as well. I think that's the great thing with your.
That's so nice. Thank you.
You do a great mixture of hardcore and more kind of sociable and friendly and inclusive as well. So it's a really good mix.
I don't make sense, do I? Like I love the.
You can tell sometimes you just need to get it out your system, which is very funny. They're great to read. So yeah, we'll put links in anyway.
Well, we started off in our intro that you are hard to pigeonhole, so that's it's inspiring to hear you talk, and all the balls that you're juggling is amazing. I mean, how do you have enough hours in a day to do all the things that you do? So that's impressive. Well, thank you for being on our podcast. Then we head over to our great outro. Well, thank you for joining us on this month's edition of Gravel Union Talks. If you have any suggestions for guests or topics you would like us to feature for future shows, then please post a comment on our Facebook page, reach out on Instagram or through our website. Email info@gravelunion.cc and Olly will be answering, hopefully. Don't forget, if you like what you've heard in this episode, there's lots more great stories, features, news pieces and all the latest gravel event information over on the gravelunion.cc website. Please like and star us on your favorite podcast platform and make sure to leave some hopefully positive remarks. Special thanks to Martijn for designing our very own music, and of course our editor Ruben for editing this show. Thank you all for listening in, and I hope you can join us again for the next episode of Gravel Union Talks. Cheers all!